all, folks. So, thank you for logging in today for the current social media webinar. We have Kristen Madison with us from Oak Ridge Associated Universities, and she will be leading the webinar until 2:30 today. The idea behind today's webinar is actually a continuation of a conversation we started last year. If you remember, we held 2 face-to-face sessions with Oak Ridge in Winston-Salem at the TTA Center. And that was an overview of effective social media practices within prevention. We wanted to continue that conversation this year with a more in-depth face-to-face training. And we're holding that in-depth face-to-face training in a couple of weeks. And Alex will be able to share with you those dates and times and the registration process. We still have several seats open in both the Winston-Salem and the Raleigh sessions that we want to encourage folks to register for. And the new face-to-face sessions are not the same. It's not the same training that we held last year. This is a more advanced level and organizationally focused face-to-face training. And Kristen will be able to tell you a little bit about the differences and why you might want to attend and so forth. So again, today's webinar is to review some of the high spots from last year and prepare folks to participate in the upcoming face-to-face webinar. So Krista, I'll kind of throw it to you and let you fill in the details if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jamie. Again, as Jamie mentioned, my name is Kristen Matson. I work for a company called Oak Ridge Associated Universities, but we go by our acronym, which is ORAU. I have been working for ORAU for almost 10 years now, and for the past 4 years, we've been doing social media training, specifically for organizations engaged in substance abuse prevention issues. So we're really excited. I work alongside my colleague, Jennifer Reynolds, who, if you come to the in-person training, you'll be able to meet her. She is based out of Asheville, North Carolina. So she's a fellow North Carolinian. Is that how you guys say it? Anyways, we are very excited to bring you today's webinar. As Jamie mentioned, this is really a webinar that is geared towards providing some high-level overviews of the things that we talked about last year during our in-person training. It's really meant to just help refresh everyone and get people up to speed who may not have had a chance to participate in that in-person training. Last year, we really focused in on social media strategy in depth. We also took a look at Facebook and Instagram. And then we talked about content creation best practices. We really focused in on how to create really great photos and videos using just your smartphone. So this year's in-person training is going to be a little bit different. I will give you an overview of what to expect towards the end of today's webinar. But during today's webinar, I do want to hit back on that social media strategy component. You've got to understand why having a strategy and a written strategy matters. I also want to just do a quick overview of some of the most popular social media channels right now and who is using them so that you can use that information to develop your strategy. Then we'll get into the definition of what an algorithm is, because that's really necessary in order for you to understand how to game the system, as we shall say, or increase the reach or the visibility or the number of people who will see the content that you post on social media. I also want to cover the essential components of some quality content. We're not going to get into as in-depth as we did last year during the in-person training. That was a full day of content. So this is just a quick overview. And again, if you want to reference our content from that in-person training, I will there's a link at the end of today's webinar that will get you all of that content. We will then talk about some implementation best practices, and I'll walk you through what we recommend in terms of how to do all the things. I will then show you a quick little demo. We'll switch from PowerPoint to me actually showing my screen. I'll pull up a Facebook page that I have just for these trainings, and I will show you how to create and schedule some posts. That'll really feed into how we recommend or the approach that we give you as part of the implementation strategy. I'll share just a few tools and resources with you guys. We'll give that full day training overview, and then we will have some time for questions. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right in and get started. So the first thing that we tell everyone is you've got to have a social media strategy before you get on and try to put out content. We have seen this time and time again where people use what we have coined the post and pray strategy. It's really the anti-strategy strategy because it does not work. It doesn't allow you to figure out, if you are successful or not. You're just really putting out content and you have no real game plan. It is one of the biggest mistakes you can make on social media, doing the post and pray. So please do not do this. We're going to walk you through what you should have in terms of a social media strategy. And then I mentioned some tools and resources. I've got a link at the end of the webinar. We have a template for you for a social media strategy that you might want to access and sort of go through some of those components before you attend the in-person training. So why do we care about a social media strategy? Why do we really encourage everyone to create a social media strategy? Well, it's because of these things. It really defines what success is going to look like for you. It helps measure impact, which, by the way, if you're grant funded, that's huge, right? Being able to show that the things that you're doing are actually making a difference and having an impact, and having some of those metrics to report to your funders looks really good. It also gets everyone on the same page in your organization. If you have a lot of people who are working on your promotion and your social media strategy, having everyone agree to and develop the strategy together just really helps in terms of consistency, to ensure that everyone's doing the same thing, everyone knows their roles and responsibilities. It really sets those standards and expectations, and then it promotes continuity. We all know, especially in the grant-funded world, people are, coming and going and in and out of positions. So having a written strategy, and it's really important, you must write it down. This is something that if you leave to go, work somewhere else, or you get promoted and you're no longer doing the social media, this is something that you can really hand off to someone else who might be coming in to take over that role, and they'll just be able to take it and run, and it'll seem as if no change took place to the people who are looking at your content, your audiences. It also outlines who can post, what can be posted, and who needs to approve posts. I give this as an example of something that can happen if you don't have a social media strategy or don't have a strategy that everyone has really agreed upon, those rules of the road. This is a photo that you may have seen before. It was taken by a police officer in Ohio and posted. They got a lot of flack for this because you can see the little child's face in the back seat. It turns out that this police officer sergeant really backed him up and supported his decision to post this on social media. because it did really, create some conversation and hopefully spark some change. But without a solid social media strategy, you don't have really those rules and regulations for what to post. And if this is something that may need approval before it gets posted, you're not spelling those steps and processes out. So these are really the core components of a social media strategy. There's your goals, your objectives, resources, audiences, the channels that you're going to use, content, engagement, campaigns, evaluation. So if you access our social media strategy template, these are the components you'll see. We also have some really good information for the types of or really good descriptions of the types of information that you want to put in each one of these components. So I'm going to hit some really big highlights today of a few of these strategy components, the key components that I think you guys really need to know about. So let me just go back, because I really want to mention, before we jump into SMART objectives, I really want to talk about goals for just a second. Goals for social media really should be aligned with the overall mission of your organization. And you've got to make sure that your goals and your objectives are reasonable for your organization. You've got to really think about how many hours you're willing to commit to social media each week, what your budget is for social media, who's going to be invested in the strategy, who's going to handle the social media for your organization. Can you enlist volunteers to help with social media, or is it just a staff thing? And who's going to have what type of responsibility? You're also going to want to think about what channels you're going to be able to support both now and in the future. So that really comes into play when you get into your strategy on channels. And then when it comes to content, content should always relate back to your goals and objectives. So remember that and keep that in mind. You've got to be purposeful with your posting. And then one thing about evaluation before we start talking more specifically about some of these components. Evaluation is not just something you do because you're supposed to do it. We do evaluation when it comes to social media because this helps us refine our strategy. It tells us what is working and what's not, so that we spend more time doing the things that matter and less time on things that aren't having so much of an impact. So it really helps increase our efficiency when it comes to our social media. So we all know about SMART objectives: specific, measurable, attainable, or audience-centered, whatever A you want to use there, realistic or relevant, and then definitely, time-based. So you've got to make sure that your objectives are SMART, because your evaluation is going to line up with these objectives. When you do your evaluation, you're looking at, did I reach that objective? So that's why we recommend that they be SMART, so you can actually measure them and report back. So I just want to have a few examples, because when you access our social media template, we really want you to think about your goals and objectives and to be specific with them. So here are just some examples of what we would recommend in terms of social media goals and objectives, or how to structure those goals and objectives. This doesn't have to be your goal or your objective, but this is just an example of how much detail we really recommend including. So let's say your goal is to decrease stigma in your county towards those suffering from opioid use disorders. So one of my objectives might be to reach 10,000 people on Facebook with a campaign featuring video testimonials of individuals in long-term recovery. So I might put a date in here for that specific campaign, such as September 17th through 23rd. Maybe my other objective is, in addition to that campaign, I'm going to develop 2 infographics. one featuring the cost savings of investing in treatment and prevention, and one featuring the success of opioid treatment. I'm going to work with the health department and the sheriff's office to disseminate those infographics monthly now through the end of the year. So you can see just how specific we are with these goals and objectives, because then it makes it really easy to say, did I reach these goals? Did I meet these objectives? Here are some other examples of goal and objective pairs. So double our number of Facebook followers between July 2019 and July 2020. Depending on how many Facebook followers you have, this might be doable for you. For others, you might need to just say, I want to increase my number of Facebook followers by 5 or 10%. So you have to figure out what works for you and what works for your organization. So objective 1, if I want to double my number, or just say increase my number of Facebook followers by X percentage, maybe I'm going to continue consistently posting engaging content. And I'm going to say we're going to do at least 4 posts per week every month. I also might want to identify 3 partners in my community that have large social media followings, where they regularly post really engaging content. I look at their social media, and they are constantly getting lots of likes, lots of retweets, or whatever channel you're using, lots of shares, lots of hearts on Facebook. So maybe I want to develop some agreements with some of those organizations offline, call them up, they're partners of mine, and say, hey, we're going to be doing these posts during this period of time. I'd really appreciate if you guys go on and like and share our posts, and we would definitely do the same for you. So this is really easy, and organizations do this all the time. Maybe another objective of mine is going to be that on a weekly basis, I'm going to go through and I'm going to actually invite individuals who have reacted or commented on my Facebook posts to like my page. And this is something you can very, very easily do in Facebook. So I would love to take a second and invite you guys, now that you've seen just a few examples of some social media goals and objectives, I'd like to just take a quick second and invite you all to, in the chat box, tell me more about what your specific social media goals are, if you have some. So take a second and go into the chat box and tell me about your social media goal. And it could very well be you're trying to increase the number of followers on specific channels. Maybe you want to provide specific education. So tell me exactly what you're trying to do with your social media. Are you trying to connect people to treatment opportunities? Don't be shy. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead. If you guys are still typing, please type. I would love to hear more about your social media goals. I am going to go ahead and advance to the next slide. If you didn't type anything in the chat box, I really want to encourage you to think about those social media goals. If you, at the bare minimum, just think about them. We would love for you to write them down and use our strategy template to do so. This is going to be really important before you attend the in-person training. We really want you to know what it is you want to do. That way, when we're going through our training, you can have those goals in mind and it'll really help you figure out things that you can take away from our training. It'll also help you think about questions that you might want to ask us while we're there in person, or things that you want us to show you how to do based on the specific goals that you have outlined. So really important. Definitely think about this. If not, write it down. Bring it with you to the training. Another really important point that I want to talk about is, as part of your strategy, is identifying your audience or your audiences. We have found that a lot of nonprofits and even government organizations and CDC, we work with them, we work with lots of other government organizations, and sometimes, we find that they want to talk to everyone. But one of the things that we always say, and this is a quote from someone wonderful, they say that if you think you're speaking to everyone, you're probably speaking to no one. And it's okay if your audience is everyone, but it's really important when it comes to social media and social media strategy to really segment those audiences, because you want to make sure that your content really speaks to those audiences and really speaks to what they care about. So it could be that your social media channel is going to serve multiple audiences, and that's okay, but we want to make sure in our content strategy that we're developing content for both of those audiences. And you might want to think about, well, we have these two very different audiences. They both use Facebook. Maybe we create two separate Facebook pages for those audiences in particular. So your audiences matter, and it will help you define your social media strategy. So when we talk about audiences, we really want people to take a look at who their current audience is on social media. So let's say you're running a Facebook page now. Take a look at who's following you and think about, is that the audience that you're trying to reach? And if not, what are you going to do to try and reach them? Once you know your audience, again, you can really shape messages and communicate with them to connect with their individual wants, habits, and values. We really want you to figure out not just those demographics, but those psychographics. So their values, likes, dislikes, interests, hobbies, personality, behavior, and lifestyle. And think about the content that's going to be most interesting or appealing to them. And these last couple things here, what are their day-to-day concerns and how can you help? That's huge. If you think about YouTube, some of the most popular content on YouTube are videos for how to solve common problems. Anytime I have an issue or can't figure out something, I go on to YouTube to try to figure it out. My husband and I had this dishwasher that we moved into a new house, and every time we opened up the dishwasher, it would kind of fall forward because it wasn't secure in the cabinet that it was installed in. So of course I go on to YouTube and type in how to fix a dishwasher that keeps tipping forward. Well, turns out all you have to do is pop out some little tab and drive a screw into the side of the dishwasher to connect it to the cabinet. Super simple. But yeah, anytime you can help somebody or help somebody solve a problem, that content's going to be extremely effective. So we always really encourage people to think about their audience's concerns or how they can help and provide value to that audience. So when it comes to audiences, here, I wanted to put this slide in here because one of the things that we've also done for OREU is we've done research on communication best practices when it comes to communicating about opioids, specifically in Appalachia. And our research participants, who included subject matter experts and community members from 5 different communities throughout Appalachia, identified these key audiences for opioid prevention messaging. So I just wanted to share this slide to just show you an example of the different audience segments and the variety that you might have in your organization. I wanted to also mention that our research participants noted that it was really important to consider community members and youth that were at high risk for opioid, engaging in opioid use due to multi-generational addiction and also geographic isolation. So to explain that a little bit more, we were told that a lot of people aren't attending community events due to that geographic isolation. So they really wanted us to encourage to think about how we can get some of those people interested, that audience interested in what we have to say. Some other individuals, groups that you may have that are not listed in here may be policymakers, media, other coalitions and board members, and volunteers. So just think about the many different audiences that you are in charge of communicating to. And you're going to figure out a content and social media strategy for every single one of these audiences. Because not all of them need the same information. So think about that. Another big mistake that we see people make on social media is being on the wrong channel for their audience, or being on the wrong, or being on more social media channels than they can effectively manage. We often get the question, well, what social media channels should I use? And the answer that we give is the ones that your audiences are on. If you're trying to reach teenagers in your community and you find out that they're not on Facebook, well, then maybe you shouldn't be on Facebook. Maybe you should figure out what channel they're on and utilize that so that you can actually reach them with your messages. So the way that you figure this out is review the national data on social media use. You can look at your own analytic data within the channels to figure out who your current audience is and whether or not that they fall into the audience demographics that you're trying to reach. And then the last bullet on here, ask people. It's amazing how many people just feel like they can't go out and ask people what social media channels they're on. If you work in the school system and have some opportunity to do some programming in the schools, while you're there doing your programming, maybe you can provide them a survey or just sit and ask them, for some feedback. What social media channels are you on? What social media channels are your peers on? And then also, if you can't really ask the exact target audience that you're trying to reach, maybe you ask people who work closely with that target audience. So if you're trying to reach youth and you can't go straight to the youth, maybe you ask a group of teachers who work with that youth group. And then also we recommend that you look at your objectives and your content. Perhaps you have a lot of visual content. Well, visual content works great on Instagram. So that's an example of how you might want to choose your social media channels based on the type of content that you have. Maybe your content, the information that you put out is usually a lot of news. News tends to work great on Facebook. So maybe that's what you want to take a look at. And then also, pick social media channels that your team has the resources to support well. Like I said, Instagram is really visual. Maybe you don't have a lot of, people who can create graphics or take pictures or do, a lot of visual content. Well, maybe, Instagram isn't the channel that you want to start with then. So all of these things are going to play into the decision that you make of which social media channels you want to use as part of your strategy. So the majority of Americans now use Facebook and YouTube. I wanted to throw this in here. This is a screenshot that I grabbed from some Pew Internet research. This came out last year in 2008. And this is a graph of the percent of U.S. adults who say they use these various social media sites either on a desktop or on their cell phone. So of all U.S. adults that were polled, 68% are on Facebook, 73% use YouTube, and then you can see the percentage of use among those other channels. The data that I looked at also went in, this is 2008 data again, said that the majority of adults use Facebook and YouTube, but that specifically younger Americans are using a variety of platforms. So I wanted to break this out because I know a lot of you guys, especially in the substance use prevention world, really aim a lot of your programming at this 18 to 24 or sometimes even younger groups. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of the data out there isn't collecting usage data on teens. So the majority of the data that we do see is with 18 and up, which is why we really recommend talking to your target audience if you're really trying to reach those in high school to figure out what they're using. So, but in terms of that 18 to 24, that millennial group, 94% of them said that they used YouTube. 80% use Facebook, 78% use Snapchat, 71% use Instagram, and only 45% of them use Twitter. So again, this is national demographic data. So please, please, please do your due diligence when you're trying to figure out what social media channels you should be on. Ask your audience. Figure out what social media channels your audience in particular in your community is on. One of the things that we noticed when we were doing some of our communication research is we worked with two communities in Tennessee. They were 45 minutes apart, but the youth in one community reported being on Twitter mostly, and the youth in the other community, they were all, well, we're not on Twitter. That's, you know, for old people. We're on Instagram. So it was really interesting. Even within communities just 45 minutes apart, the youth in their community were on completely different platforms. So ask your target audience. So think about this. Are you currently on the right channels for your audience? Again, this is an exercise that we really recommend that you go through because it is so important. You don't want to waste your time on one platform when that's really not where your audience is. So think about this. We want you to use that social media strategy template to really sketch out who your audience is and really think through how you're going to go about figuring out what channels they're on. So, Algor this isn't, no, I'm not talking about the 45th U.S. Vice President when I say Al Gore. I'm talking about the algorithm. And I really wanted to focus in on this because I really need you to understand what an algorithm is and why it matters. An algorithm is really the brains behind the social media news feeds. And the algorithm is going to determine who sees your content. It's estimated now on Facebook that approximately 5% of audiences actually see content from, you know, any one piece of content from pages they follow. So you've got to understand the algorithm because we want more than 5% of your followers to see your content. So I put this quote on here. This is a quote from the VP of Newsfeed at Facebook, and this really sort of explains their algorithm. So I'll read it to you. It says, when a user visits Facebook, there are thousands of potential posts that might be displayed in their newsfeed. The Facebook algorithm takes these posts and arranges them according to how likely the user will be to interact with the content. And this is a process called ranking. It used to be that when you signed on to Facebook, you could sort of scroll down and everything would be in chronological order based on how recent it was posted. Now, if you notice, and this is, I give this example because I think it is a great one. My husband's grandmother is constantly, she thinks that people are putting things on her Facebook page so that she can see. She doesn't really understand the whole news feed concept. But she's constantly calling and saying, how do I find this one thing that somebody put on my Facebook page? And, I had to sit her down while she was here visiting, and I really sort of tried to go through and explain the algorithm and explain, unfortunately, how the algorithm works. When you close your Facebook page or your Facebook app on your phone, or if you're on a computer browser, you close the browser out and you open it back up, that algorithm is really doing that ranking process all over again. So just because you open up Facebook in the morning and see these 5 posts, you might not be able to find those 5 posts in your news feed when you open it up in the afternoon. That's because of the algorithm. It is constantly recalculating and re-ranking your news feed. So the algorithm for Facebook in particular, and most all of the social networks are moving over to the algorithm world, but I'm going to talk about this in terms of Facebook right now. With Facebook in particular, they have in their algorithm over 100,000 variables. And it is everything from how many likes a piece of content has, how many comments, how many shares. It takes into account a person's previous interactions with posts from that source. And a lot of the algorithm and a lot of the ranking is done by artificial intelligence. In fact, they joke that Facebook doesn't even know what's in Facebook's algorithm. So we have seen over the past few years some major changes in how the Facebook algorithm works and the different signals that go into determining which posts should be shown to users. Last year, there was a major update that happened to the algorithm in January, and marketers lost their minds. Instead of focusing on what made content popular and attention grabbing, they switched their algorithm, turned it on its head to focus on what makes content personal and conversation worthy. So this is again more quote from Adam Mosseri, the vice president of newsfeed at Facebook. This is a quote that he gave to Wired magazine in January, and I really want to point out some of the things that he said in his quote. He said that they would be making updates to ranking so that people have more opportunities to interact with the people they care about. As we roll this out, you'll see less public content from like posts from businesses, brands, and media, and more content from friends and family. He also went on to say that they're going to prioritize posts that spark conversation and meaningful interactions between people. So posts that inspire back and forth discussion and posts that you might want to share and react to are the posts that people are going to want to see. So I put this in here and I try to explain algorithms to people because you need to think about how Facebook is prioritizing posts so that you're crafting content that falls in line with that ranking or those signals. So with this new update, they said, well, if your post sparks meaningful conversation, then, it's going to rise to the top, which is really great for you because I feel like, especially in the prevention world, there's a lot of conversation sparking content that you could put out there. So they also went on to say with this latest algorithm update on Facebook that there's going to be more friend content and family content, but also more group content. So a lot of marketers who ran pages were really upset because they're like, nobody's going to see my content. Only 5% on average see it anyway. Now it's going to be even worse. So they really, we've seen a shift from a lot of people running pages. We still see the pages, but we also see a lot more groups. So brands and organizations are really getting onto the group bandwagon because it's an opportunity to get their content in front of a small, highly engaged audience. So we also saw, this was really interesting to all of us because video was such an important part of Facebook, and it still is, but people are seeing less video in their actual news feed itself. So very interesting. They also went on to say, as part of the updates to the new algorithm, that they were going to categorize active interactions versus passive interactions. And they were going to prioritize those interactions which were active, so commenting, sharing, reacting. And it doesn't much matter, as much if people are clicking or watching your videos or, doing the viewing or hovering. What really matters is that active participation in conversations and active, commenting and sharing and reacting. So think about those things. Think about how you can craft content that's going to really get people to take action, to comment, to like, to share. And a lot of times what we recommend is appealing to emotion. That's really sometimes the key to getting people to actually actively interact with your content. So we're going to be seeing a lot more changes to the algorithm. We just saw a new update over the past couple of weeks. So we're going to be doing a deeper dive in the in-person trainings into what really matters, exactly what's in each of the algorithms for the channels, and how you can shift your strategy to conform and take advantage of those new algorithm variables. So you might be a little overwhelmed with that explanation of the algorithm and everything that you really need to think about in terms of crafting your content. But I wanted to put this in here and say, don't worry. The algorithm's constantly changing. We know that. So if your head's spinning, we want to tell you that it's going to be okay, and that the absolute most important thing that you can do is have quality content. Quality matters, and quality content starts with a solid content strategy. That's why we really encourage people to look at that strategy template and to work with their organization to figure out what their content strategy is, what constitutes quality. So having that strategy that outlines what you're posting, planning out content in advance with your audience in mind is the key. So let's, to explain quality content, I like to talk about what bad content is. So, I like to put this up here. So what is bad content? Is it content that I think is bad? Nope. Is it content your boss thinks is bad? Absolutely not. It is content that fails to engage your audience. So if you have content that's engaging your audience, that is quality content. So let's talk about content strategy. So we live in an increasingly visual first world. People's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, and often now text-only posts aren't going to cut it these days. If you're on Facebook for personal use, you've noticed that you can add a colorful background to text-only posts. And that was in an effort to, get people to pay attention and to see your post. Just the plain black and white text, people just scroll right through it. And so we really encourage people to post a variety of interesting, engaging, and visual content. And the reason that we do so is because studies have really shown that social media posts with visuals deliver way more engagement. So if engagement is the goal, those active interactions to get your content in front of more people, then you want to make sure that your content's visual. So we recommend to try a mixture of stock photos, candid cell phone photos, graphics that are made with graphic creation software such as Canva or Adobe Spark. Those are free tools. infographics, memes, and more. And even adding emojis, which is something you don't have to even have a camera for. You can add emojis in there. That's going to increase your engagement. So also, the other reason that we say use visuals is because studies show that people only remember 10% of what they hear, but if you pair a relevant image with your content, people can remember 65% of that information after 3 days. So your recall is going to increase from 10% to 65% just by adding a relevant visual with that message. Quality over quantity, we're going to preach it every day, and you don't have to post just to post. So you may have seen my goal and objective example earlier on in our webinar where I said, hey, I'm going to post at least 4 times a week. Well, you don't have to do anything. If you don't have good content to post 4 quality pieces of content a week, then it is definitely, we would rather you post 1 quality piece of content a week, because it's actually going to hurt you in the long run if you're posting bad content. Facebook and Instagram and the other channels, they're going to say, well, this person puts out content that's not engaging. So even though this post that they're putting out now might be really good, we're not really sure their content's iffy. We're going to just automatically, right out the gate, show it to less people. So it hurts you to post bad content, which is why we say quality over quantity. And again, the best content is going to add that value for your audience and drive engagement. And especially if your post can spark conversation, that's what's going to be golden for you, particularly when it comes to Facebook. One of the great things that I think has happened with the new Facebook updates is that they're really prioritizing local content, because they're trying to increase, or they're trying to get rid of, all the fake news, and people have shown to really trust content from local organizations. So Facebook is prioritizing local content, which I think is really great for all of you who are working in community-based organizations. You work with your local communities. That really just helps you in terms of the reach and potential number of people who are going to see your content. We want you to think about how you can use a variety of these elements in your content. So like I said, just using emojis helps increase engagement, or the likelihood that people are going to click, like, react, share, all of that, comment on your content. So think about how you can use these things with your content strategy. And as always, we say mix it up. You don't want to post the same type of content over and over, okay? So we have this content ratio sheet that we've put together. There are tons and tons of studies and models for how you should break up your content ratio. This, again, will be available in the link that I have at the end of the webinar, so you can download this, you can use it. It just shows all of the different rules and models for content ratios. So the bottom line is mix it up. Don't keep posting the same type of content over and over, because your audience is going to get bored. I also want to just quickly do a plug here for some research I mentioned earlier, the research on communication best practices when it comes to opioids in Appalachia. This research was sponsored by CDC's Division of Injury Prevention and Control and the Appalachian Regional Commission. We were really trying to identify effective content and messaging strategies that Appalachian community-based organizations could use in their opioid abuse prevention, treatment, and recovery efforts. So if you're struggling with thinking about what type of content to post on there, how to mix it up, this is a really great resource for you to be able to use if you are communicating about opioids. I have a few slides that I'm going to just quickly go through. You'll have access to this webinar, you'll have access to the slides, and there's a copy of this report in that link that I'm going to share with you at the end of this webinar. So you can download it, you can get all of that information and all of those suggestions for key messages, framing, spokespeople, dissemination, all of it when you download that report. So I've got these slides in here. You'll also have access to a copy of these slides so that you can have these. I'm not going to really go through, but what we did in the report is we broke up the key messages, framing, and dissemination strategies by different audiences. So this is just general public. Anybody can really hear these messages. So no matter who your audience is, everyone really needs to hear some of these. Youth, we've got messages for youth in particular. We also have messages specific to parents and caregivers, and messages specific to individuals facing addiction. So again, please access that report if you do any sort of communication about opioids, because I think it's some really great research and can give you some really good ideas for content that you want to create and post on social media. So again, you'll hear this over and over from both Jennifer and myself in the in-person training, but we've got to create content that really shows that you have an understanding of your audience on a deep level. So think about what your audience cares about, what are their challenges, what are their motivations, and what content do they already love and interact with. And again, each piece of content you post should serve a specific purpose. Do not just post to post. Please have a strategy, have a purpose. Make sure that every piece of content is helping you achieve those goals and objectives that you put forth in your strategy. And again, one of the best things you can do is aim to spark emotion. So what else can you do to increase the visibility of your content? You can definitely put out content, relevant content, that's engaging on a consistent basis. One of the other things that you can do, though, is actually respond to every or at least most comments and messages that you get on your post. Definitely want to thank new followers. If you have any corporate sponsors, donors, or volunteers or other key partners, they love posts that recognize them on social media and tag them. That's a really great strategy, because that not only gets your content in front of your own followers, but their followers as well. So that's a really great way to increase visibility of your content. And also, don't forget to educate your supporters about the need to spread the word on social media. So make sure that your website has links to your social media pages. Make sure that when you're at events, you're telling people, hey, we have a Facebook page too for such and such. You know, we'd love it if you follow it. And then, you know, when you talk to people who are your partners, again, I already suggested this, you know, ask them if they'll share some of your content and really act as sort of an ambassador for you. You can also consider creating a social media rapid response team, and this may be people from within your own organization or people who are active volunteers in your organization. So let them know, hey, on such and such day, we're going to be running this campaign. We're going to be posting this post. It's going to be we're going to post it at noon. We'd love it if you'd go on at noon and comment on it, like and share it. That's going to get you some really quick engagement and increase the visibility of your post. Look for other opportunities to identify supporters who might have active social media accounts themselves, and ask them for help in amplifying your work and sharing your content. So we tend to call those people influencers, people who have a lot of influence in their community, a lot of followers. You know, maybe the mayor in your town has a lot of followers. Oftentimes we find that sheriff's departments have huge followings on social media because everyone likes to know what's going on in their communities in terms of crime. So maybe you ask the sheriff's office to share one of your posts to all of their followers. And use cross-channel promotion in your emails, making sure people in your emails have access to your social media channels. If you get an email from anyone in our organization, they are supposed to, in their signature line, have links to our ORAU Facebook page and our ORAU Twitter account. So think about ways that you can do that in your own organization. So get your content shared by other bigger pages, definitely. I mentioned the Sheriff's Department. That's a really great way. But of course, they're not going to want to share your stuff if your content's not good. So make sure that it's good, share-worthy content and sparks that conversation. I always like to go over, so we talked about content strategy, we talked about, strategy in general. I like to talk to people about how to, what I call, do all the things. And this is really the implementation piece. So if you download our social media strategy document, you go through, you've got your great strategy, you're ready, you know what type of content you're going to post, you know what content is going to engage your audience. This is really our suggestion for how to go about putting that strategy into action. It's never going to happen. Great social media, you've got this great plan, but if you don't have a plan for implementation, it's going to be really hard. So the first thing that you're going to want to do when it comes to implementation is really determine those roles and responsibilities. Figure out who's going to be in your organization the social media lead, who can help create content, who might need to be the approver of that content, and who all is going to have various roles. So we also say that to think through your implementation strategy, you're going to really need to think about what you already do and how that might need to change. Some questions that you might want to ask yourself is, where do you currently turn to for content? Where can you turn for content? How do you decide now what to post? And where do you go for those graphics, videos, and who does your approval? So again, this is just an example of what we recommend in terms of an implementation strategy. So this is how to do all the things and how to do them all well. So, and this also gets everyone involved. So on a monthly basis, we always recommend that you meet with your team or everyone in your organization or leadership to generate content ideas. We do this within our own organization. We have a communication and marketing group who oversees our social media accounts. And then we have people in the different programs, such as myself, who really are working on the various projects. So our social media team meets with select people from different programs to find out what is going on in each program. What are some areas that we could highlight this month when it comes to our social media account? Also, what we recommend is reviewing last month's post and page metrics. Figure out what worked last month. Maybe you want to do more of that this month. Think about some upcoming holidays, awareness days, or other community dates to create content around those. And then if you have decided that you are going to follow a specific content ratio, let's say you pick the rule of thirds, where a third of your content has to do with X, a third of your content has to do with Y, and the other third has to do with Z. Make sure that you're coming up with content for each of those 3 areas. We recommend using a content calendar, which I have a template for you at that link I keep teasing you with. So a content calendar is just basically a document where you can come up with, when you're going to post your various content. It is also a way to help you draft your content in advance. A lot of people, the one that I use is an Excel spreadsheet. A lot of other people do it in Microsoft Word. However it works for you, do that. But we really recommend having that sort of content calendar where you can organize that content in advance. We recommend developing graphics and videos for the month based on the content that you have. Get all of that content reviewed and approved on a monthly basis. Draft that content, draft your posts, and then give whoever needs to review and approve all of that content a month at a time. It just makes things really easy. And then you can go through, once all of that content's approved, and you can actually schedule your posts across all of your channels. So you've got all that done on a monthly basis, but then what we recommend on a weekly basis is going out and finding really great relevant content, news stories that came out. We also recommend that you review your posts for the coming week. So if you're scheduling a month in advance, you want to make sure that you know what you've scheduled. We always give the cautionary tale of what happened with the NRA as an example of why you need to do this. So the NRA a few years ago had a scheduled post that was going to go out on a Friday that just said, "Happy Friday, shooters." Well, they forgot, or maybe they just weren't thinking about it, but the Thursday before was the Aurora, Colorado movie theater shooting. And then Friday morning, the NRA had their Happy Friday Shooters post, and they had tons of backlash. So you, as like a substance abuse prevention coalition, you don't want to have some, really maybe a more happy-go-lucky post and something terrible happen in your community, maybe an overdose of a prominent person in the community. You just want to make sure that your content's not going to, be out of place, if that makes sense, which is why we really recommend making sure you know what you've scheduled, and why we recommend reviewing every post on a weekly basis. Daily, we recommend that you check your page, respond to those comments, because again, that's the way to increase your reach and engagement. Thank people who have shared your content. Go out there and look at your partner posts and influencers and make sure that you're liking their posts too. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. So if you've asked the sheriff's department to share your content or engage with your content, make sure you're doing the same for them. And comment appropriately on those pages. A lot of times people who might follow one of your partners' pages will see a comment from your organization and think, well, that was a really inspiring and thoughtful comment. And they'll actually click on your page name to go to your page, and they might see what they see and decide to follow you as well. So it's an opportunity to get your name in front of people. So evaluation, everybody always leaves this to last, and we really want you to make sure as part of your strategy you're thinking about this from the beginning. So again, you're always going to want to make sure that you're monitoring throughout the life cycle, and we say do it on a monthly basis. It's that's an attainable goal. Social media strategy really boils down to post content based on best practices and what you think is going to resonate with your audience, and see if it works. And if your strategy isn't working, do something else. So again, we evaluate and we review social media metrics because we don't want to waste time. Our time is precious, and that's why we really recommend doing a lot more evaluation as part of your social media strategy. You've got to think about if you're meeting objectives and your goals. And we have this saying, repost your unicorns. I say it's our saying, but it's really not. I think Mari Smith, who's like a Facebook guru, first said it, so we can't really take credit for it. But unicorn is really that piece of content that did exponentially better than you were ever potentially expecting. So if it did great one month, maybe you can repost it a month or two down the road. It did well the first time, so who's to say it wouldn't do well the second time? So you don't have to keep coming up with brand new content all the time. Chances are the audience who saw it the first time around is going to be a little bit different the second time around. So reuse your content. You don't have to continue creating. It's all about how you can save time. So by evaluating and looking at your social media metrics, you're going to figure out which pieces of content were your unicorns, which ones performed a lot better than average. There are native analytics tools within some of the platforms, so we really recommend that you use those. That's going to get you the most detailed information, so Facebook Insights and Twitter Analytics. And in a minute, I'm going to pull up Facebook to show you how to schedule posts, but I'll also show you where Facebook Insights is on a page so that you can access that. But there's also third-party analytics tools like Hootsuite, and those aren't bad to use either. Some people are just more comfortable using third-party tools than Facebook Insights. So let me do this. Let me pause the screen. I will exit out of the PowerPoint, and I will bring up a page for you guys on Facebook. So here we go. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, I have a page that I use for training and just sort of fun and playing around. A lot of times when the algorithm changes, I like to try things out. And also it's great to bring up in training because then I can do whatever and I don't have to answer to anybody because this is just my page. So this is Ace and Darla. They are my two little babies. This is Ace right here on the right-hand side in the picture, and then Darla. I love them, love to post pictures and videos about them, and, you know, dogs are really great, great ways to engage your audience. So this is their page. Of course, I am logged in under my Facebook profile. You have to have a personal Facebook account before you can create a Facebook page. So once you log into your Facebook account, and if you need to create an account, in the next slide of resources in the PowerPoint, I have a link for how you can, it takes you step by step how to create a Facebook account. But the way that you create a page is using this little drop down caret. It might be a little hard to see, but it's over here on the far right of the page, but this will list any of your pages that you currently have access to in any capacity. There are different roles that you can assign people on pages, such as, analyzer. So that's what role I have for our ORU Facebook page. I can't post anything, but I can view the metrics and analyze those metrics. And so here's Ace and Darla. I'm full administrator. I can do whatever on this page. But you would go down here if you wanted to create a page and actually create your page. But here's where you can access all the pages that you have some sort of a role on. This is also the menu that you're going to access if you want to create any ads or fundraisers or create groups. So this is really your action center right here. So right down here, this is our news feed. This is the home page of our Ace and Darla account page. And the way that we create a post is by coming down here, clicking here, and typing whatever we want. So let's say this is my Wednesday post. All right. I'm going to add whatever photos and videos I want. I can also check in. I can say how I'm feeling. There are these three little buttons that you can click to expand. There's a lot more that you can do in every single post. You can add a poll. You can start a Q&A. Those are really great ways to spark conversation. And remember what I said earlier, if you can spark conversation, that's going to really increase the chances that your content's going to get seen by your audiences. So this is really, I like to show people this as part of like our discussion on how to do all the things, how to implement, because one thing that you might want to consider doing is giving access to people in your organization to create content. So they can go in here and they can actually create posts and they can save them as a draft. And then you can, if your role is really the administrator, you can go in to look at all the drafts and you can schedule the ones that you like. You can edit things that need to be edited and then schedule them, or you can just immediately publish. So this is how you're going to do all of that. So the way that you save posts as a draft or schedule post or post is all the same. So you get your content in here, whatever you want to do. Let's say we want to put some hearts behind this because we don't want just text-only posts. So down here, if you scroll down, this is going to give you a few options. The first little drop down says share now. That's the default. So if I click this share now, it's going to immediately go to post on my Facebook page, and all of the people who are following me, a percentage of them are going to get it in their newsfeed based on whether or not Facebook thinks they're going to care about this post. So most likely my mom and my sister will see it because they love everything that Ace and Darla do. So they see their content right away. The other thing that you can do is if you click on that drop down, you can go to schedule this post. So this is, like we said, do your scheduling on a monthly basis. So you can go in here and create all of your posts for the entire month based on your content calendar, and you can schedule them to say, okay, this one's going to go out on Tuesday of this week. Well, this one's going to go out Thursday of this week, and this one's going to go out Wednesday of next week. So this is where you do all of that scheduling, and you can actually pick day and time. The other thing that you can do that I recommend is saving things as a draft. So you can click draft, and you can also change the audience by this second drop down. But I'm going to show you how to post a draft. So save as draft. Not now. We don't need to add that. Sometimes Facebook likes to show you wonderful pop-ups. But so now that post that I've created is saved as a draft. But how do we access it now? Well, they went ahead and added this handy dandy little box here, see draft. So you can click there. Or if you want to access all of your drafts as well as look at all of the posts that you have scheduled, because we recommend doing that on a weekly basis, you're going to go up here to Publishing Tools. So once you go to Publishing Tools, then over here on the left-hand nav, you're going to see posts that I've published and some, general metrics along with the date of when it was published. You can also go here to see posts that I've actually scheduled for specific days and times, and then you can go here to draft. So I can click on this one, which says this is my Wednesday post. And one of the really cool things here, and you can do this when you schedule posts too, you can see how this post is going to look on desktop, but you can also look to see, is that post going to look just as good on mobile, or are my graphics maybe too busy that it's not going to show up as good, or maybe it cuts off something that I really didn't want it to cut off. If you like it, great. You can click this drop down and either publish it right away, you can schedule it, or you can backdate it. Don't worry, I wouldn't worry about that right now. Just think about publish and schedule. Or you can actually click over here to hit edit. Let's say I spelled Wednesday wrong and I needed to fix it. Well, here I could fix it. I could hit save, and then I could go back in and click the drop down arrow to either publish or schedule it. So this is what it looks like when you click schedule. It allows you to select the actual day and the actual time when you want to publish your post. And then you could go into scheduled posts and you would see it up here. You could change the date if you needed to, or change the time all the way up until the scheduled day and time when it would become a published post and then show up here. So think about how you can sort of use that option as part of your implementation strategy. Maybe, again, you have a group of people who create a bunch of drafts for you, and maybe this is the way that you, as the person who needs to approve them all, maybe you're the one who, in your roles and responsibilities, list. You're the one who goes in on a monthly basis and decides when to schedule each of these posts or when to hit publish. So this is a really great way to save time. You can sit down and on one day a month, go in and spend the whole day just creating your content and scheduling the posts. And then, really all you have to worry about throughout that whole rest of the month is making sure you know what you published and interacting with people, having conversations with people because all of your content's there. And again, there may be some things that come up from a news story that you want to share, and that's okay. Not everything has to be scheduled in advance. So it is okay to schedule what we call blanks on your content calendar that say, well, on Thursday, I didn't really have anything that I thought was quality content. So on Thursday, I'm going to make it a point to go out and I'm going to look at news stories. I'm going to look at other organizations' pages, maybe SAMHSA, see if they've posted anything relevant recently that I think my audience would actually care about, and maybe I'll share their post. So I will go ahead and switch back to the PowerPoint so that we can wrap things up. I know we're almost at time, and I want to make sure that if anybody has any questions, we can answer those. So, in wrapping us up today, I wanted to share this list of tools and resources. So these, and again, you'll have access to these slides. I'm sending them over to Alex and Jamie, so they'll be able to disseminate those. And again, you'll have access to this recording. But these first two links, I wanted to put these on here, setting up a Facebook page and an Instagram account. These will really, if you don't have one already, we have these in here, so it'll help walk you through exactly how to do that step by step. And then this link that we have here is access to all of the resources that I mentioned already during today's webinar, and including the PowerPoint presentations from our in-person training last year. So I really recommend that you go through that, especially the social media strategy template, because we want you to be well prepared when you come and sit in on the in-person trainings, because you're all coming to those. And we did some previous webinars in addition to that in-person training last year. So definitely get access to those and watch them. We really do more of a walkthrough on the Facebook and Instagram tools and the platforms themselves, what everything is. So that's a really good webinar, although some things have changed. They periodically put out updates to the platform, so they might look a little bit different now since it's a year old, but most of the content is still very, very relevant. And then we also did a webinar on Twitter and Snapchat, and then a webinar on Intro to Facebook Advertising. So I really want to make sure that you guys get access to those and can watch those and look at the content that we provided last year. That way you are not behind at all and you're at the same level as everybody else in the in-person training, because as Jamie mentioned and I mentioned, it's really building upon the trainings that we've already done. So just a quick overview, May 8th from 9 to 4 is the training in Raleigh, and May 9th from 9 to 4 is the training in Winston-Salem. So as Jamie mentioned, there's still seats available. And I'm sure Alex can tell you all about how to register for those. We're going to talk about, we're going to review some of the best practices for Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're going to talk about some recent updates to the platforms, the algorithms, and we're going to give you an introduction to YouTube strategy. YouTube is not one that we covered last year, so we wanted to make sure that we cover that a little bit this year since it is such a popular channel. Although it's not a traditional social media channel, there are social elements within it. So we want to talk about how you can incorporate YouTube as part of your social media strategy. Also, we're going to introduce some new strategies for Facebook and Instagram. Particularly, we're going to go and talk more in depth about Facebook groups, since that's something that is being prioritized by the algorithm. And we're going to talk about Instagram TV, IGTV. And then we're going to talk about some social media campaign best practices. I know all of you guys are going to be running really cool campaigns. We see a lot of campaigns when it comes to Red Ribbon Week and things that happen, prom promise. And then we're going to have lots of discussions and activities. So if you came last year, we're taking your feedback. We know you want more activities and more breakout groups and more discussions. So we're incorporating that into this year's training. So with that, I can open it up. Alex, I don't know if you can open up the phone lines in case anybody has any questions. And if she's going to open up the phone lines, I would recommend everybody just go ahead and put your phones on mute. And then Alex, if you have any announcements, please go ahead and give the announcements, and then I will stay on and answer any questions.
Thank you, Kristen. I really just want to encourage everybody to register for the upcoming face-to-face trainings in May. And here in a little bit, I will be sending out a survey for everybody to fill out, and I will include the registration links for the face-to-face trainings and the links from some of the materials from last year for any of you who would like to review those. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask.
And Alex, I will say that I think there's a question box that's separate from the chat box. I cannot see that box. I'm only seeing the chat box. So if anybody has asked any questions, if you wouldn't mind reading them out to me, that'd be great.
The few questions that have been asked, I just responded with the links. So if anybody has any new questions that they want to ask, I will be glad to share those with Kristen.
All right, and Alex, were you able to open the phone line in case anybody wants to ask any verbal questions?
I'm trying and it's not letting me. It's being funky today.
Well, if that's the case, then that's not a problem. If you do have questions, I really recommend, Alex mentioned the survey that is going to come to you after this webinar. If you have specific questions, please either send them to Alex or add them to that survey. And then I would be happy to either follow back up with you or make sure that I answer the questions. I could answer all the questions, give them to Alex, and then she can disseminate them to everybody so that everybody gets the benefit of hearing the answer. And then the other thing that we can do is make sure that we cover that content in the in-person training. There's also going to be another webinar after the in-person training that goes into a little bit more depth of some other things. So there's plenty more to come. But Alex and Jamie, thank you guys so much for having me on today. And, oh, audience question. Okay, yes, now I can finally see them. Can the link be shared to register for these in-person trainings? Perfect, yay, okay, awesome. Well, if anybody has any other questions, I guess now I can see them and you're welcome to put them in here. And again, I would be happy to collect those questions and come up with those answers and then share them all with Alex and Jamie. So with that, thank you guys so much for hanging in there. I hope you appreciated today's webinar, and just make sure that you fill out that survey. It's an evaluation of today's webinar, but it also allows you an opportunity to input topics or things that you want us to go over during the actual in-person training.
Kristen, someone just asked a question. They wanted to know if there's a gold rule for social outreach to get people to come to a prevention event.
Oh, a gold rule for social outreach. I would really recommend, so in Facebook in particular, there is an option for you to create an event in Facebook. You can also create an ad to advertise those events if you have, you know, a few extra bucks. And Facebook advertising is not super expensive anymore. And same thing for Instagram. You can do, if you're creating good ads, you don't have to spend a lot to get them out in front of people. So again, we have that webinar that talks about Facebook advertising. So I would recommend creating a Facebook event, have your partners share that event, and consider creating a Facebook ad to promote that event throughout your community. Does that help answer the question?
So the person responded saying they've paid for ads, but no one came from Facebook advertising, only from advertising at churches.
Okay. So one of the things that I would want to look at is how is the audience you chose for that ad, how you set that ad up, and your strategy for that ad, and also the content. So I'd love to take a look at that. Jennifer and I love this sort of thing. So if you want to email us ahead of time, we can chat, or we can chat if you're coming to the in-person event. We can take a look at that ad and the strategy behind it. But also sometimes, people are reluctant to say that they're going to a prevention-oriented event on Facebook. So that's something that we found, and something that might be true for your organization as well, is that you have trouble getting people to actually RSVP for that event, or say that they're interested, just because of the stigma around addiction. So that just might be a lesson learned, that there are other better opportunities, such as going through your local church to get people to actually register in a way that's not so, hey, everyone I went to high school with, look at the events I'm going to. So it doesn't always work, but I'd love to look at your ad and look at your strategy, and think about brainstorm ways that maybe you could try it again, and tweak some things to see if it works.
Okay, I've figured out how to unmute people, I think. Maybe it's not working. Okay, you can unmute yourselves now. The question box is filling up, so.
Oh gosh.
I know. Okay. In the in-person training, are you going to cover how to gain social media trust in the community?
Ooh, that is something that we can definitely incorporate. Let me think about that one. I love that idea to have that as a component. So yeah, let me think about how we can do that.
And let's see, somebody else, let's see if I can read it all. Where'd it go? Somebody else wrote, I work for a governmental entity who manages the 2 social media platforms that I'm allowed to use, Facebook and Twitter. Would the strategies that you outlined still work in this scenario?
Yes, we have created a lot and worked with, I mentioned CDC is one of our big clients. We've done a lot of social media campaigns and social media strategies for them. So we certainly understand some of the, I don't know if that's the right word, but some of the challenges that government organizations have when it comes to social media. So I would say, of course, without looking at some of your organization's or social media policies, it's hard to know, what they allow and what they don't. But I would say, yes, all of the best practices that we're recommending would work in any, government organization or down to your local coalition.
Awesome. I think that has answered everyone's questions as of right now.
Okay. Well, great. And again, the survey is coming to you guys via Alex for the evaluation of this webinar, and it'll give you that opportunity to provide us with some more details of what you want to see. We're still finalizing the content for that, so there's still time to get your opinions and your suggestions in.
All right, I'll stay on a few more minutes if anybody else has any other questions. I hope everybody has a good rest of your day.
And thank you guys again. Thank you, Alex. I'll go ahead and sign off. If there are any other questions that come through, feel free to send them to me in an email and I can respond back.
All righty, thank you very much.
Thanks. See you guys in a few weeks.